A couple other stories we're going to talk about. We got states' rights versus federal rights. Let me move these notes over here. These pieces of paper are like all rolled up. I need to get a better like display for these or put them on my computer or something. They're very old school. I got them written with an old ink pen on little scraps of paper. Okay, so states' rights versus federal. We saw this become much more relevant after Roe v. Wade got overturned. So, Banda, I know you don't live in the U.S., so I don't know how much you know about Roe v. Wade, but that was a court case back in like the 70s or 80s that was approved at the federal level. So for the entire nation, it said abortion is legal for everybody. All states have to let women get an abortion if they want one. That was Roe v. Wade. Whereas previously, it was up to the individual states. And we have 50 states. So, depending on which state you live, some allowed abortion, some didn't. And that's relevant because that's how America was founded, with the concept of states' rights should always be more important than federal laws. The reason being, we wanted to maintain unique cultures for each of the states. We didn't want the entire continent of America, to have the exact same culture. We understood that far northeast New York City, they want a different culture than the deep south of Alabama, Mississippi, Texas. The same way California wants something very different than Florida. And so the whole agreement when we created the United States was that we have to let states live how they want to live, and we can't have the federal government, the whole United States government, coming down and saying, no, you all have to live the same way. And you apply that logic to every controversial subject. So, for the situation of abortion, previously each state got to decide. Then in the 70s or 80s, this court case, Roe versus Wade, came through, and the federal government had to rule on it. And they said, you know what? All states, you can do abortion because they created this lie of women's rights as if the right to kill somebody is a right that any of us have. And so that's been the law of the land for the last 40, 50 years. And then just this year, like a few months ago, very controversial decision came down from the federal government saying, not anymore. We're done with that. We're going to go back to states' rights. Every state gets to decide if its citizens can have abortions. And we know what the time limits are in terms of third trimester pregnancies, if it has to wait 6 weeks or less, all these technicalities, or if it's just flat out illegal in all cases, no abortions, period. If there's exceptions for rape and incest, for example. The federal government said, we're stepping out of this because we understand each of you states have very different beliefs about abortion. We're going to let you guys decide for yourselves. That was big. That was a very big win for conservatives. It was a very big win for Christians who believe that abortion is murder. It was the biggest win in 50 years, frankly. If you didn't know, America kills 1 million babies per year via abortion. It's pretty tragic. That's a lot of dead people. And if you also didn't know, America's birth rate has, for the first time, crossed into the negatives. Meaning, more Americans die than are born every year. And so, our country would run out of people if we didn't mass immigrate shitloads of people through our borders. So, what's happening is that abortion is both causing our population of Native Americans, people who have been here for multiple generations, to decline, and it's sending 1 million of our children to heaven without ever even having a chance to know the world or their parents or anybody else. Change if that's the problem. You'd have to explain, Banda. I don't know what you mean by the rules of aborting should change if that's the problem. I'm just staunchly against it in all cases. I'm against it when it's situations of rape. I'm against it when it's situations of incest. The only time abortion, in my opinion, should be legal is if it's a direct threat and a real significant threat to the mother's livelihood. If the mother would potentially die or be seriously harmed by the pregnancy, then I think it makes sense to terminate the pregnancy. Obviously, I'm okay with that. But every other situation in regards to abortion, two wrongs don't make a right. It doesn't matter that it's going to be difficult to raise the child because the mom doesn't make enough money and she's a single mom. Her life's going to be so hard. Oh my God. Well, you shouldn't have had unprotected sex with somebody you didn't plan on having a child with. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two is that to imply that life being difficult means it's not worth living. What? Since when did we establish that as like an agreed upon standard for life? That growing up in poverty is worse than being dead? Since I don't even understand the logic to that. So, you know, I try to make my views on abortion crystal clear because to me it is a crystal clear thing. People want to argue, even conservatives want to argue back, well, in cases of rape or incest, as I said, two wrongs don't make a right. It could be tragic, you know, that you have a young girl who is raped by a stranger or a family member. It doesn't really matter. Taking that evil out on a child doesn't fix the situation. All you've done now is hurt two people. And by hurt, one of them, I mean you murdered. And then the second one, I mean, the mom still has to live the rest of her life as a rape victim. You didn't like somehow undo the tragedy by not having to have the kid. My views are pretty controversial on abortion. I know it's not what most people believe, but I tried to do it. I tried to reason. I tried to use science. I tried to say like, well, maybe up until 12 weeks or something like that, or 16 weeks, or maybe up until you can hear a heartbeat. Able to abort due to endangering the mother, fully agree. Like I said, I'm down with that because the whole thing is, you know, you need somebody to care for the child. And I know people would say, well, if the mother can't care for her child for economic reasons, why don't you agree with that? That the community at this point is where you have to talk about being engaged in a church and all of the other means of motherhood support centers that exist. That's where our resources should be being funneled into to help. Getting pregnant without consent. Like I said, even in cases of rape, it's tragic. We need to get that mom all the help she needs for being a rape survivor, but also all the help she needs for being a future mother. Because the sad fact is, I'm sorry mom got raped, but that has nothing to do with the child. The child shouldn't die over that. The child didn't do anything wrong. The child didn't rape the mom. So that's where I have arrived after many years. When I was younger, I mean, I spent most of my life pro-choice, as they say, because I hadn't really actually thought through that the fact that you just can't really deny that it is a life. And once you concede that it is a life, it doesn't matter if it's a stranger who put that life in the mom. It doesn't matter if it's a family member. It doesn't matter if the mom doesn't have enough money. You got to envision a better world. You got to think what we need in the future rather than settle for what we currently have. You're right. The foster system has to improve in order for the best outcome. But like I said, you can't allow perfection be the enemy of progress. If you sit around saying, we're going to keep allowing all of these abortions until the foster system changes and gets better, guess what? The liberals will never finance the foster system getting better because they want to keep abortion legal. So the only way you'll ever actually get money to improve the foster systems and to help the community come around these mothers who aren't prepared for parenthood is to say you can't abort them anymore. All the money we used to spend on Planned Parenthood and helping you abort your kids, we're going to put that money into the foster care system and any other kind of motherhood support centers that we can have in the communities. And listen, if you don't want to give us money, that's fine. But now you're the one making the moms' lives harder. Because previously you were more than happy to help them get an abortion. But now you're not willing to help them actually raise the kid. I thought you were pro-women. You know? So I agree. We got to improve the foster care system, but we can't say we're not going to do anything about abortion until then, because nothing will ever happen. And that's exactly what they want from us, is to just keep things the way they are. So that's on the subject of states' rights versus federal rights. And, we're sitting here talking about the highly controversial subject of abortion. The problem is states' rights versus federal rights goes into other subjects too, such as gay marriage. Liberals are trying, I think it's already federally passed, that gay marriage is legal in all states in America. I don't even know the current status. Let's Google real quick. Is gay marriage legal in America? Newly married couple in Minnesota, blah, blah, blah. Supreme Court back in 2015. U.S. Supreme Court rules gay marriage is legal nationwide. Yeah, I thought it was. Because, I remember being in Alabama when this happened, which was 2015, shortly before I moved. When was same-sex legal marriage? Quick history from USA Today. So, I wasn't sure, though, if the individual states' Supreme Courts, some of these states' same-sex marriage bans were part of a national movement in response to President Bush. What does it say? State sued, challenging these states' bans. Blah, 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 blah. So anyway, you see the same thing. It's the same argument that should the federal government get to decide if gay marriage is legal, or should it be a decision at the state level whether or not homosexuals can get married? I guess, or bisexuals? I don't know. Anything other than male-female marriages. As I always go back to, why did America form itself in the way that it did? We chose intentionally to have these individual states with their own unique cultures and their own worldviews for this exact reason. On controversial subjects such as abortion, such as gay marriage, such as interracial marriage, there's a lot of stuff out there that nowadays people assume isn't controversial. Like, oh, I thought we just got past that this is what everybody wanted. No, that's not true. Maybe because you watch CNN and exclusively CNN, you thought that was true, but that's not actually how a lot of America thinks. A lot of America thinks there are differences between races, for example. Race realism is what they call it. And so, should these decisions be pushed back to the states? Obviously, as a very conservative, I would say, person, I would say yes, they should be. We need to let these states do what their constituents want to do without the federal government's influence. Pretty straightforward. What's interesting here is during the last, not even the last midterms, when Roe v. Wade got overturned and the whole abortion thing happened, the Democrats immediately said, they warned they warned their constituency, all the Democrats, they said, if they undo the abortion federal law, I can tell you next, they're going to come for gay marriage and they're going to come for interracial marriage. And at the time, I kind of rolled my eyes like, this is just hyperbole. They're just trying to scare their base. And to their base, that is very scary. The idea that they might lose some of those, what they call rights. But they have to realize that those rights, if they're sitting from if they're granted by the federal government, then they're illegitimate in the first place. The federal government doesn't exist to grant rights in regards to family and abortion and these kind of things. That's not why the federal government exists. So, not much more to talk about on that story. It's kind of like my analogy for states versus federal rights is that when we created this country, we agreed, United States, we are all a part of the same family. We are united as one nation. Under God, by the way, very clearly in the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. So if you want to sit around and pretend that you can throw federal laws that blanket the entire country, but then you want to ignore the part about under God, let me know how that works. A little bit of a hypocrisy there. But the whole concept was supposed to be that we're one family, but we being states, are autonomous in that we can run ourselves based on how each state's constituents, its citizens, want to run the state. They'll elect leaders who represent at the state level what we want, state governors, etc. And as a united nation, the whole purpose of being a nation, and rather than just 50 separate states that aren't connected, is that it's an alliance. Similar to us being part of NATO, if any kind of foreign threat were to harm any of our 50 states, we all have an agreement that as a nation, we will respond. That's where the federal government gets involved. That's why they exist. They're supposed to be our bodyguard whenever foreign enemies, people abroad, try to fuck with the United States. That's why we have our taxes paying for a federal military. And we don't have like a state army for every state. We have a federal army. You know what I mean? So, states versus federal rights, very interesting subject. And I think it actually, it probably will play out to where the Supreme Court starts striking down some of these more controversial subjects as we shouldn't be involved from the federal level. At the state, you guys decide what you want to do with gay marriage. You decide what you want to do with interracial marriage. The same way you decide what you want to do with abortion. Okay, so we talked about Twitter. We talked about states' rights versus federal rights. We talked about this succubus right here. Not even succubus, because that's not accurate. Succubus, implies they're somehow attractive and they lure gullible men who are sexually attracted into them to do Satan's will. This is what kind of demon hunts children? I don't even know what the word is for that, but this evil entity right here is on our list to do some research about so that we can stop her when I reach Huntsville next month. It's going to take some time. We're going to do some Googling. Maybe we should do that now while we're on the subject. Kathy Molhig.